Mr. Giorgi Khelashvili, welcome to Junior Interview. We welcome 25,000 Russian and Belarusian people since the beginning of the war. How many Ukrainian refugees did Georgia receive?
I think 25,000 is an overblown and exaggerated number. I don't follow these things on a daily basis, statistics, but what I heard is that that's a natural average inflow of tourists. There was some speculation by the opposition about the increased security risks of this inflow of visitors from Russia and Belarus, but as far as I know from our agencies, who are dealing with this issue, there is no significant security risk. Of all things, there are up to 20,000 security personnel stationed in Tskhinvali and in Abkhazia as occupational force, and they represent the danger to Georgia's independence and territorial integrity, not the few thousands of people who might be potentially discontented with the policies of their president, in this case Putin, and just crossed into Georgia. I don't have an exact number, but we have Ukrainian refugees. The usual practice is that these refugees usually cross the border with Poland, and then they choose where to go afterwards. The statistic is that those of them who have relatives in Georgia opt to come to Georgia, but the number of these refugees is not great at the moment. But I expect the number of Ukrainian refugees to grow in future.
Who obliged Prime Minister Khelashvili to say that Georgia would not join sanctions?
I don't think it was an obligation. The Prime Minister said very plainly what Georgia proceeded to do. It was a simple statement of fact that Georgia has very limited resources for inflicting the measures on Russia that could actually terminate Russian aggression against Ukraine. As it happens very often, this statement was taken out of context and then exaggerated and then amplified by the opposition throughout their media and then also in international press. Let's just look what Georgia is doing to support Ukraine. We are part of the international financial sanctions that are imposed by SWIFT and so on and so on. And you know that Georgia was initiator, participant and co-sponsor of quite a few international measures in international organizations, from the UN General Assembly to International Criminal Court to Council of Europe and so on, that's effectively sanctioned Russia in terms of international law for its behavior, for its aggression against Ukraine, and Georgia did not hesitate to join the international community in condemning and as much as possible limiting Russian aggression.
It's quite clear that Georgia can't afford joining sanctions. But isn't Georgian Dream responsible for that?
I don't think that Georgian trade with Russia has grown extraordinarily. Quite the opposite. If you look at the most essential part of Georgia's needs, which is energy security, precisely under Georgian Dream, Georgia dramatically diminished our dependence on Russian energy. The same can be said about many other things, especially after signing the DCFTA, right, Deep and Comprehensive Free Trade Area Agreement with the European Union. We are doing our best to reorient Georgian businesses to the European markets, right? There is one segment which dramatically increased its market in Russia, and that's wine production, which was sanctioned before, but then Georgian wine regained the market. The government always encouraged winemakers, precisely because of security risks, to reorient their production to the European markets. But it's a very slow process. So it would take ages and ages for Georgian winemakers to find their niche there, explore these markets, raise awareness about Georgian wine there. So I think many winemakers just opted for the easy way, which was Russian way. And but I think this will be a good lesson for them that the easiest doesn't always mean the most secure.
Avoiding sending volunteer troops in Ukraine is explained with inevitable confrontation with Russia. But asking for the membership in the EU is not. Could you explain that?
Sending volunteers to Ukraine is an issue that is regulated by international law. So no government can deliberately organize and send volunteers, in which case any country would be considered as a party to the conflict, as a belligerent. Georgian volunteers are there in Ukraine fighting, even a member of parliament. So this was yet another overblown criticism towards the government, that the government did not organize the chartered flights of the volunteers to Ukraine. That would have amounted to direct participation in the conflict. As for the European Union, it's very easy and clear. We have it in our constitution. It was Georgian Dream who came up with this idea to include membership of NATO and membership of the European Union as constitutional principles. We are simply abiding what the Constitution tells us, irrespective of what potential complications can be. Now, we already made a pledge to apply to the European Union by 2024. Neither Ukraine nor Moldova ever set a date about application. In our case, the decision was much easier. It was simply moving the date 2 years earlier for application, right? But also, I mean, what we thought about was interesting development in the West, in the European Union, that now the West is much more coherent about Russia, about Ukraine, about the need for unity. And at the same time, I think there is this growing awareness of the fact that delaying membership either in NATO or in the EU is counterproductive. With this, political and legal circumstances, we decided to expedite the process. That was it. There is something that one would call a red line, that our membership is a national cause. It's rooted in our history and our identity, and therefore it just cannot be changed.
If, under the governance of GD, Russia attacks Georgia, will it be correct to say the Georgian Dream could not avoid the war?
I think every historical circumstance is very different. And I would not compare today's massive Russian aggression to what happened in 2008. I think that was an isolated case, even if harbinger of the things to come. We never said that it was Saakashvili's fault what happened, but rather handling of the conflict and its aftermath was quite poor on the part of the government. Especially handling of the war and then of the refugees, the internally displaced persons. The effort to secure the population, to inform strategic communications was almost non-existent. Many government members fled the country. Overall, there are things that you cannot avoid, and then there are things that are avoidable. And I would just repeat what I said in the beginning, that every historical episode is unique, so you just cannot make analogies and compare. So I would not go as far as comparing 2008 with what is happening now in Ukraine, or what, God forbid, may happen in Georgia.
MP from the party Georgian Dream and Deputy Chair of the Foreign Relations Committee, Mr. Giorgi Khelashvili, was our guest. Thank you for this interesting interview.
Thank you.